All right, so we're part two of the office renovation, just kind of giving you a little walkthrough of what's going on here. Probably the most challenging part of this job is routing these cables that you see here. Like I mentioned before, if you've never seen the bottom of if you've never seen the top of your ceiling, what's on the other side of drywall, there are 2x4 studs in the walls, and there are, let's see if I can possibly zoom into this here enough to actually see it. Well, there's not enough light in there, but there is a 10-inch tall joist that's in there. You have to drill some holes through those, and you're going to have to route your power wire from your new switch in the wall. I don't know why homes don't have every single room with some, convenient lights already installed in the ceiling and power wires. This is the only room in the house that doesn't do it. I guess they just, bottom dollar electrician just wasn't paid to do something like this. So the first thing I had to do was I had to relocate the switch on the back of the wall here to be on the other side. Now this is a dual wide switch box. It's a 2-gang receptacle because I'll have a fan switch and a light switch, but I just mounted it right on the other side of the existing switch. Wanted it to be inside the office so we could turn the fan and the lights off, from a comfortable sitting place in here and not have to leave the room to turn the lights on or off. So but the very first thing you have to do is you're going to have to route your power wire up into the ceiling and then over across the joists. And if you've planned it all nice and accordingly, hopefully you'll have a few home runs where you'll be able to go in between the joists and just push the cable down through the channel. But unfortunately, as you can see from the marks here and the marks there and the mark there, those are where the joists are, and you have to cut holes in between them and fish the wire between them. It's a real skill and challenge to do it. I'm fortunate that I only had to go blind in between one pair of joists and not between two. Otherwise, I probably would have just cut out a little access panel right there. I just would have cut one out and fished the wires through it. But I was able to use a fish tape, I think there's what they call it, sometimes a steel tape. And let's see if I can pull this out. So all it is just kind of a thick steel band. It's stiff, but still somewhat pliable, so you can move it around. Once you've got your holes in the joists and you've got the holes in the ceiling, you just have to kind of fish this steel rod, so to speak, through it. And once it comes out the other side, you just tape your cable through it, and you use the little, it's got a little fishing, spinning reel here. You just go ahead and spin it back, and it pulls the whole thing back in. It'll pull your cable with it. Wasn't too hard to do in between here. I got lucky, was able to find the holes. They lined up pretty well, and after about a minute of pushing the fish tape, I eventually got it through. Same with this guy over here. If you plan it all accordingly and you're careful with your drilling. Oh, and by the way, I used a 1-inch spade bit to cut my holes just to give myself plenty of room. I didn't want to have a really tiny hole that I had to try finding. Save your jokes for that one. Anyway. So, not too hard to get the cable through there if you're patient and you did some good planning. Where it really becomes a challenge, though, is right here. So, as I mentioned, there's actually a power cable. You can't really see it. It's behind the stud here. It came down from the ceiling and went to the original light switch that was on the other side, and then it all went to these outlets. Well, so right now the power cable resides right here, but there's no power cable up there and across the ceiling. You've got to make those holes, and you've got to figure out how you're going to pull a cable through kind of a 90-degree bend, and that's probably the most challenging part of this. I didn't know what the joist structure looked like up there, wasn't certain what I was going to find, and as you can tell, I had to cut out some access holes. That's pretty common. You're almost always going to have to do that when you meet a junction, like if you're going through the floor or if you're going through the ceiling especially. There's almost nothing you can do about it, but one piece of advice: cut out, a section of drywall like I did, and I don't know if I can show it it's down there in the corner. Save those pieces because since you cut them out, they'll fit perfectly back in here when you're done, and that's how you're going to patch this all back together. So here you can kind of see a little bit more about the joist. It's not particularly good lighting up there, but I drilled a few holes to kind of figure out where stuff was. Unfortunately, the hole on the left, found out the hard way that there was just no way I was going to get through it. It was drilling through like 3 solid inches of wood from this direction and 3 solid inches of wood going in that direction. So I moved over to the right, drilled a 1-inch pilot hole through one of the, I think it's called a king stud maybe, I'm not sure, header stud, something like that. And then drilled it through the joist and just got lucky, and the holes lined up, and I could push a screwdriver through and see it from the bottom. And it just took a little bit of patience. Stick the cable in there. I used just took a hanger, kind of bent the end of it so I could grab and pull the cable. And fortunately only had to bring 2 cables through here. Not too complicated and tricky. And at the end of the day, it'll be a bit of a pain to have to repatch them, but all in all, I'm pretty happy that that's all it took for me, was just 2 additional holes. I didn't have to cut any between here. And there's the sealing box. I used a really cool little handy brace to brace the sealing box, so I can be confident the fan's not going to come crashing down on my wife and I or anyone that's below us. It's mounted securely. That kind of metal bar you see there is actually mounted nicely to the studs. That is called a safety brace, made by Westinghouse. Really, really simple to use. $12 Home Depot. So anyway, next step is to actually mount the lights in there and give this a test, and hopefully there'll be a 3rd video of that being successful, or there's going to be a video of me cursing and screaming and tearing down my ceiling because I cut the holes wrong or did something and messed it up. For the most part, this job's on a scale of 1 to 10 in the terms of difficulty. If you're kind of good at this kind of stuff, if you like home improvement, I'd say this is probably a 3 or a 4. It's time consuming, but it's not really that hard. Just take some patience and some good planning. There's not a lot of stuff you need to be aware of. One thing I will say to be careful of, and this almost bit me in the butt on this one, was I have a really nice, my favorite stud finder, Zircon stud finder here, excellent. You can see when there's like AC, you can see duct work and stuff behind the walls, and it usually does a fantastic job of it. However, these ceiling joists are like 10 inches tall, and it's really hard to see back in there, but there's actually a duct, just a return duct from the office that actually is above this, another room in our house, the one we're converting, but there was a duct there, and I didn't know it until I started cutting, and thank God it's not going to be in my way, but that would have been a real bummer if that duct was there, because these lights have a certain amount of height that they need to mount up into it, and it would have bumped into it, and I would have never been able to mount it. So unfortunately, it's one of those times where you just really, all the planning in the world, I just got lucky that I missed it. If I had moved the lights 6 inches closer to the wall, which I originally was planning on doing, I would have hit it, and that would have ruined my day. This was the very last hole I cut. They're all nicely in line with each other. They all are nice and evenly spaced, and that one would have been ruined. I would have had to put it somewhere else. It would have messed up the look of it. I would have been pretty unhappy. So again, I was saying that this may be a 3 or a 4 if you're kind of a novice. This is my first home. I've had it for a year. I like doing this kind of thing. Helped that I worked on a basement that was unfinished, and I've gotten used to how to pull cable and some of the finer points of it. If this is your first time ever doing anything like this, or if you're I don't know, tool challenge, if everything in the world looks like if all you've got is a hammer, then everything in the world looks like a nail, right? So if you really don't know what you're doing, this is probably a 7 or an 8, probably going to be pretty difficult, but grab a friend that likes to do this kind of stuff. I've helped a few other people do this kind of thing in the past, and it'll go by quickly. You don't need to pay an electrician or a contractor, hundreds of dollars to install your lights. This total project, definitely under $200, about $60 for the lights, $60 for the trim, cable. I bought a big spool of it. I'll have tons left over. Dimmer switches and things along those lines. I mean, $200, and I'll have 6 lights and a fan, and pretty happy with that. So, well, stay tuned for the next video, hopefully of these lights actually turning on and working.